Chapter 9, Queen Inanna, Part 2. Turtle Rock, Arizona. The piloting agent shouts back to Gator's team as they prepare themselves mentally for their first outing as a unit. Gator has decided to take the team on a test run to apprehend the Devil Oscar for interrogation to see how well they mesh. Should the team have a lot of issues operating together, corrections will have to be made before going into the field against an opponent the caliber of a Yazatan rogue. Coming up on the drop zone. If the staging area is compromised, proceed to the secondary pickup. Gator nods, distributing packs to his team. Good hunting, the pilot says as the rear hatch opens. The team drops out of the plane as it lowers over the roof, and they immediately roll into firing positions and sweep the area for threats. Fourth floor, apartment 427, Gator whispers. He has at least 2 demoniac bodyguards. I don't care what condition you leave them, but Oscar must be taken alive. They form up on the roof access door, and Gator nods towards Reuben, who kicks it open. The team rushes down the stairs, sweeping their weapons in every direction to clear each floor as they descend. 3 friendlies in the hall, Means whispers, checking a wrist-mounted heat sensor. The body temperature of the possessed devils runs much hotter, averaging between 102 and 105 degrees Fahrenheit. On it, Royce replies, cracking the door to the 4th floor open and tossing in a flashbang grenade. As soon as the light erupts, the concussion drops the civilians to the floor and temporarily shuts down their vision and equilibrium. The team rushes in, forming up on room 427 and kicking in the door on Gator's signal. The first demoniac turns, standing only a few feet away from them when the door breaks apart. His head is reduced to a crimson-colored mist due to a shotgun blast. Before the body hits the floor, the rest of the team is inside and screaming for Oscar to get down flat on the floor. Oscar hisses, shoving his other bodyguard at them as he rises from the couch and runs for the fire escape. 2 precise rounds tear through the back of the devil's leg, dropping him before he can reach the window. Secure the prisoner, Gator shouts, wrestling with the demoniac for control of the soldier's own gun. Kente, Royce, and Means run over to Oscar, but the devil waves his hand and knocks the men against the wall with an invisible force of energy. Reuben leaps over his comrades, grabbing Oscar by the back of his head, wrapping his fingers deeply into the devil's hair and slamming his face into the floor. Blood and shards of teeth fall as Oscar's head is lifted back up. Oscar throws his arm out towards Reuben's heart, but the former Marine twists just enough to trap the arm beneath his own and drops his elbow down, shattering the devil's radius. Oscar screams out in pain, causing Reuben to slam his face one more time into the floor. Means and Royce are back up and rush them, placing sealing papers across the devil's skin to block his abilities, magic, and from discarding his host. Gator falls back through a door leading into a small restroom, the demoniac atop him. The larger man presses his massive forearms to Gator's throat, cutting off his airflow. Gator knees the demoniac in the sensitive area between his scrotum and anus, rocking him forward enough for the veteran to wriggle free and reverse the hold. Gator drops his elbow down on the center of the demoniac's back, raising his head up. The former SEAL snatches his head in a tight headlock and twists violently, snapping his neck. He stands back up, shaking from the adrenaline release. The rest of his team crowds the bathroom door, watching. Enjoy the fucking show? Gator asks, picking up his gun from the floor. What took you so long, old man? Reuben asks, receiving a hard punch to his chest for the joke. Get Oscar to evac and bag anything here that might be useful for the nerd's research. The team obliges, and Reuben and Royce carry their prisoner back up to the roof, while the others bag up everything that could be possibly used. At this point, with their lack of information, it will not hurt to be overly cautious. Books, unopened mail, ritual paraphernalia, blood-encrusted bowls, weaponry, all of it is bagged and taken. Not bad, guys, Gator compliments, A devil and 2 demoniacs aren't exactly child's play, but you handled them with ease. Now don't get swelled heads, though. This Yazata is going to be in a completely different league. We have a lot of preparation to do before we face him, so we need to hurry up and get out of here. Finishing, the team exits the apartment. The hall is chaotic, and the effects of the flashbang are just now wearing off. The entire sweep was performed in the span of only a few minutes, and the team's efficiency is superb. Most of the people here will never know what took place in those crucial minutes after the flashbang erupted. Arriving in an absinthe volunteer fire department fire engine, Inanna and her newest mind-controlled servants reached the forest clearing along the Harrison River, where her commandeered plane and other slaves await. Prepare for departure, Inanna says, emerging from one of the trucks. We are leaving this state. My brother is currently in Florida, and I cannot wait any longer to go pay him a visit. Having already endured 10,000 years of torturous waiting for this moment, Inanna finally possesses the opportunity and means to confront Yamura. In the body of her brother's vessel's mother, Inanna hopes that the action will provide further insult to him. Breaching some sacred and unwritten rule, she will kill the son of her host with her own hands. Inanna shivers with anticipation at the mere thought. Inanna calls over a female servant and demands that she search the luggage to procure her new clothing. These rags are covered in human fluids and stench. Find me something clean, she orders, stripping off the soiled garments, and begins to wash herself in the nearby waters of the river. Here, my queen, a mind-controlled woman says, bringing her over another outfit. Water still dripping from her face and hair, Inanna takes the garments and dresses herself once more. Now clothed in tight blue jeans and a low-cut maroon tank top with no bra, Inanna tries her best to adjust her body and accentuate her feminine features. She is constantly annoyed by the fact that her human hosts lack the curvature of her proud Sakari form. It saddens and angers her that she will never again walk in that body. She attempts to lift her breasts up, but lets go of them with a growl as they drop. This body is not as perky or as taut as my previous. She remembers the hideous remains of Lior, and shudders at the alternative. It is better than that one, I suppose. Inanna takes a quick inventory of her remaining servants. It was a crushing blow for her to lose Kara, but the others acting as her security were the strongest and most fit of her slaves. Those that remain now with her would do little good in battle, save for the newly acquired firefighters. Calling over an elderly woman who she deems would serve her no greater purpose, Inanna orders her to kneel and lean over a bowl, to which her throat is slashed open. Inanna chants an incantation as the woman's blood gushes forth into the bowl. Santia, I demand an update. The image of her sole remaining acolyte appears in the old woman's blood. I'm en route to make contact with the fighting instructor of your brother's vessel. Stuart has still not shown up at the home of his grandparents, so I got tired of waiting. I'd hoped that this trip would prove more fruitful. Check with him quickly, but then return at once to the home of the boy's elders. I am confident that he will make contact with them sooner or later. Yes, my queen. Inanna ends the conversation, pouring the blood onto the grass. The elderly woman's drained body collapses lifeless to the ground. Load up everything and prepare to leave, Inanna informs her servants before lying down to rest. Her body is exhausted, and mentally she is beyond the limits of normal fatigue. Sleep comes to her easily. Returning to base after a successful trial run, Gator's team brings the restrained and barely conscious Devil Asuka before the researchers and director of Silver Fox himself. Shackled with specially designed wrist and ankle restraints, symbols carved into the metal prevent Asuka from being able to cast any spells or use his other powers, such as Shunkan Ito teleportation or telekinesis. You idiots are in way over your heads, Asuka says, looking around at the Silver Fox operatives. Only a handful appear combat-ready, and he knows that he and others like him have succeeded in dealing a crippling blow to their forces. We've been picking off you amateurs so easily. He laughs, ignoring the blood drooling out of his mouth as he speaks. Do you really think that capturing me is some big accomplishment? Ha! I'm small time compared to what is still out there waiting for you. Fellas like me were lowly grunts in the war. When our side lost, we were swept away under the rug like a bad memory. The Grigori? You have no idea what you're getting into. Most of our power was sealed when we were transformed after our defeat, but the Grigori retained all of their Yazata shine by evading capture. The rogue Yazata working with you that killed our men, what is his name? Leinster asks, kneeling to face with the devil. The director shows no fear. What does it really matter? You can't beat him. Regrettably, our learning curve has become sharp due to necessity. Your friend is not as invincible as you think him to be. You're all bluster. A human cannot kill a Yazata. The difference in strength between them is astronomical. You would stand a better chance leaping into the air to catch the sun in your hand than defeating a Yazata in combat. Should mankind need to do so, we would discover a way to do that as well. You sell short one of our defining traits as a species. You're just pests, Asuka sneers, ignoring him. You aren't anything more than a nuisance to higher beings such as us. Gator pokes the devil in the forehead with his index finger. We took you out easily enough. I'd say we're a step above nuisance. As they speak, the researchers conduct various tests on Asuka. Blood samples are collected. Temperature readings and scans are performed, as the Silver Fox operatives try to collect as much data as they can from their captive. Sir, Mulder whispers to Leinster as he approaches, life signs are negative. He's completely used up this host. I'd say the body has been dead for at least 2 weeks. Leinster is puzzled by this news. It was his assumption that devils required living hosts to be viable. You do not require living hosts? Asuka shrugs. It's preferable, but they wear out so easily if they aren't top shelf. The good ones are getting harder and harder to find. Is that what you're doing? Trying to find hosts? I don't have to answer you. Kill me or exorcise me, just get it over with. Are the people that your pet Yazata murders unsatisfactory for possession? Sometimes things get complicated, like when your stooges barge in and get in the way. We're done, Leinster tells his operatives. He doesn't have anything useful to tell us. We already know where to find his Yazata ally. Arrogant primates. Asuka laughs. No amount of preparation is going to ready you for facing him. You will all be killed. I thank you for the advice, Leinster says, pulling out his sidearm and dropping Asuka with a single shot through the right eye. Gear up and be ready in 10 for an ops briefing. You're taking the Yazata out before he gets wise to us. Gator and his team nod, running off to prepare. Approaching the rundown trailer of Damon Rodnovich, Santia has no idea of what awaits her. The trailer looks to be decades old and in ill repair. Several patches of duct tape attempt to cover holes that were seemingly created through several shotgun blasts. The rain ducts are broken and hang down in places where below them the ground is bare of vegetation and muddy. Green stains of algae paint the faces of the trailer's outer walls, and baseball-sized wasp nests hang from the awnings. Never before has Santia seen a home in such poor condition. 60-gallon drum garbage containers are overflowing with glass beer bottles and faded pizza boxes. Santia briefly thinks that the trash is more likely to belong to that of a frat house than an adult martial artist. One of the cans tips over, spilling the garbage everywhere, and a frightened and quite possibly inebriated raccoon scurries past Santia for safety. The young woman holds a hand to her heart, laughing at her foolishness for having jumped. A red 1970 Ford Ranchero sits on cinder blocks, the transmission lying nearby underneath a black tarp. The grass around is yellowed and dying from spilt chemicals. A fire pit with still warm coals catches Santia's attention. Because of this, she knows that the owner of the home has been by recently and may still be around. "Who the hairy fuck are you?" a gruff voice asks from behind. Santia can smell the heavy aroma of alcohol, marijuana, and musk in the air, coming off the man in thick waves. "And why do you remind me of a demon?" Santia is speechless, taken aback that in mere seconds the man has ascertained her association with the Sicarii through his senses. Who the hell is this guy? Inanna warned me to be cautious when dealing with Stuart's mentor. But he was able to get the drop on me so easily, and I still can't even sense his aura. "My name is Santia. I'm emissary of the great and powerful Sicarii Queen Inanna. I don't give a rat's ass if you're Ed McMahon. Why are you on my property without an invitation? I'd have known if I'd ordered a hooker." Santia's teeth grind together at the insult. She slowly begins to turn and face the belligerent man, but feels the end of a 12-gauge shotgun being pressed into her back. "Nah, I think you're going to stay just like that. I am here on urgent business. Queen Inanna demands a moment of your time. Soon, she shall sweep over this realm like a great tide, and all will bow before her." "Never heard of the bitch. She's some kind of Eastern European?" This brute is completely ignorant. Perhaps I cannot sense his aura because he is weak. I wasn't paying enough attention. That is the only way he was able to get the drop on me. Santia spins, dropping and turning as she draws a dagger from her thigh from beneath her skirt. Radnovich stands his ground, unimpressed. As the woman rises to attack, a single motion cracks across her skull and sprawls her across the gravel. Limp, Santia feels like every bone in her body has been broken. She struggles to sit up. Blood runs down her forehead from where the stock of his gun struck her. Nausea fills her consciousness, and she fights not to throw up. "Pretty cute. Bet I could have some fun with you." "What are you?" Santia coughs, her head swimming. Even now, she cannot feel a trace of the man's aura. Radnovich bends down, picking her up by the hair. Santia squeals, clawing at his hands. The large man laughs as her fingers dig into his muscular hands. He seems not to notice. With a flick of his wrist, Radnovich throws Santia against the side of his ranchero. The blocks roll and the entire vehicle falls with a loud crash. "Start talking. I lose interest in women very quickly." "You recently trained a boy named Jake Stewart," she shouts, fighting to stay conscious. "Do you remember him?" "That punk? What about him?" "He has become the vessel for Yamura, former general of Averna." "Possessed?" Radnovich grins. "Well, that's interesting." "My queen is Yamura's elder sister and his sworn enemy. I was sent to see if you held any loyalties to the boy." "I taught the kid what he wanted to know. Past that, I don't give a shit what happens to him." Santia's chest rises and falls rapidly, still filled with fear and pain. She leans against the non-functional car, trying to stabilize her balance as her head continues to swim with waves of nausea. "If we were to move against Stewart and end his life, you would not interfere?" Radnovich seems to disappear, moving faster than Santia's eyes can follow. A tremendous pressure explodes from her midsection, driving all of the air from her lungs. Exhaling loudly, a mist of saliva is expelled. Sucking back as much oxygen as possible, the woman gasps desperately in panic. The large fist of Radnovich presses into her gut, forcing Santia to vomit the full contents of her stomach. Stinging tears run down the woman's face. Acidic saliva and mucus leak from her nose and gaping mouth. "I got no warm and fuzzies for that punk," Radnovich whispers. "You can do whatever the hell you want to him." Santia is unable to respond, her lungs on fire. She continues to try and suck in air, but cannot. Hyperventilating, she trembles as her face loses all color. "Your queen comes here to pick a fight with me, then we got a problem. Understand?" Santia merely blinks, looking into the cold eyes of the powerful man. Radnovich moves his arm away and takes a step backward, allowing Santia to collapse to her hands and knees. The dagger she dropped after first being struck is only 3 inches from her grasp. Staring at the weapon, Santia long debates whether or not to reach for it. "Don't be stupid," Radonovich says, grinning widely and baring his yellow teeth. "I would break off your arms and rip out your heart before you ever got to that pig sticker." Trembling, Santia does not doubt the man's claim. Able to move faster than her brain or senses can process, it would be suicidal for her to try anything so bold. "You got any more questions?" Radonovich asks. Santia finally finds her breath and slowly stands. She knows that, without being infused with a portion of Inanna's strength, either one of the man's attacks would have left her broken and immobile. Worse yet, she fears that Radonovich was not even trying to cripple her with his blows. Even holding back significantly, a punch from Radonovich could prove deadly. "Unless I've got you wet now, it's time for you to get the fuck out of here." Radonovich begins walking away. His complete lack of fear of Santia is sobering. She would have had more ample time to move to grab for her knife, but if she did, she would not be leaving. Without saying a word, Santia slips back through Radonovich's gate and to her vehicle. Sitting in her car, Santia is hit with all the reality of her experience. Sweating heavily, she looks into her rear view mirror to see the bloodied and dirty face peering back at her. That was no man, Santia thinks. It was surely a monster. Turtle Rock, Arizona. Rummaging through the armory and replacing their high-impact ammunition and anti-devil warding with diamond blade melee weapons, diamond dust rounds for the guns, and even special Kevlar vests that have had diamond dust woven through the fabric, the men load up for the fight of their lives. Without knowing the maximum force of a Yazata strike, they have no idea if the protection of the special vest will be enough to deflect a killing blow. "Could we just make a diamond missile and drop it in on his ass?" Reuben asks, slipping on his black undershirt over the protective vest. "Not with him being able to teleport. We have to be up close and personal to make sure the job is done," Gator replies, switching out his sidearm. "How are we gonna counter teleportation anyways?" Means asks. "I'm fast, but instantaneous movement isn't something that a human body can react to." "The geeks cooked up these little jammers," Gator says, tossing Means a circular metallic device with no center. The device looks like a strange metal donut, with buttons in place of sprinkles. Mulder figures the Yazata teleport by displacing time and space around them. He came up with this little sucker to counter that. Somehow it's like a miniature particle accelerator. It'll change the speed of the atoms in the air around him as he tries to teleport, and hopefully disrupt his movement. It may only work once, if at all, so we'll have to use it wisely. "And if it doesn't work at all?" Means asks, looking less than impressed. Gator does not blame him. He does not like the idea of trusting his fate to untested technology either. "Keep your head down and time your shots very carefully," Gator finally responds. Leinster approaches them, looking like he has done just about anything other than shoot someone in the face. "The readouts of the warehouse have not changed," he says. "No one has briefed our target, and he has not yet fled the nest. We're ready to hit on your call." It is asking too much of you to attempt to take your opponent in alive. I realize this. Even so, we are not completely clear on his motivation. We know that he is a Grigori deserter, and is working with at least one devil. Beyond that, we don't know their endgame. "I catch the drift, boss," Gator says, his voice cold as the hunter within him switches on. "We'll try and keep Turkey Lurkey alive long enough to get him to spill his guts. Then, we spill his guts for real." Leinster nods approvingly. "We can only assume that their targets were not at random. To wed these two factions, we must assume their scheme is not one that ends well for us. Top priority is taking him out of play. Information is secondary," Gator says, reading between the lines. "Surprise must be in our favor. You will not get a second chance at him. If things go south and he senses defeat, he will try to flee and vanish. We know this from Hilliard's intel. When he managed to score a single hit, the Yazatas genuinely seemed surprised. We must play off the bias that humans are too weak to be a threat. Prove to him how much damage we are capable of." "Understood," Gator replies. He looks to his team, and their eyes show that they are all in agreement. They share a trait in common. Perhaps this trait is why they were selected by Silver Fox. Perhaps it's a byproduct of what they do. Either way, they all have the steadfast eyes of a predator about to begin the hunt. Inanna paces the plane, ignoring the glowing light, instructing her to be seated. None of the other occupants of the plane dare attempt to tell her as much. She is too filled with adrenaline and anticipation to remain in her seat. The end of her long road to revenge nears its completion. "How much longer?" Inanna asks with impatience, rapping her knuckles on the cabin door. Having enough sense to leave some freedom within the mind of her pilot, so that he has continued to take care of himself, and is healthier than the other slaves are. Inanna is still annoyed that doing so was her only intelligent option. If the pilot were as brain-dead and zombified as her other slaves, he would be unable to effectively do his job. "We'll begin descent in the next 15 minutes. He wants to comment that they have only been in the air for 2 hours or so, but keeps this to himself. Slave or not, he does not want to be killed in one of Inanna's raging displays. Land similarly to how you did in the Indiana forest. Do not wish to attract any undue attention. I'm quite sure that the owners of this plane are still looking for its whereabouts." The pilot nods, but in a moment of clarity, certain thoughts reach through to him. Perhaps Inanna's confidence causes her to pay less attention to the level of control exerted upon her servant, or his own willpower prevails. Either way, the man's thoughts are flooded with information. The guilt and shame of being complacent in the Sakari's schemes nearly causes the pilot to break into tears. Should he break down in front of Inanna, he knows that she would kill him or further her control over his mind. Instead, he does his best to ignore his conscience and not allow it to show through on his expressions. "Have you flown this route before?" Inanna asks. She is curious of the pilot's knowledge of the area. "Not this path exactly. I've flown into Jacksonville and Miami before, but nowhere in Central Florida. I'm not entirely sure of the terrain. There may be nowhere inconspicuous for us to land." Inanna extends her claws and grins devilishly, purposely revealing her elongated fangs. "I am confident that you will come through for me." The pilot shivers. Inanna's terrifying demeanor chills him to the core. Captain Donald Garrison is an experienced veteran pilot, having served 10 years in the Air Force before going into commercial flight. Every one of Garrison's instincts screams at him to stop this monstrous non-woman while he still has the opportunity. It's almost guaranteed that Inanna will become more focused the closer they come to her desired destination. With increased focus will come increased influence over her mind-controlled servants. 15 minutes, not a second longer, Inanna says, walking away from the door. She picks out one of her servants and orders them to rise from their seat. In an instant, the servant's throat is opened, and their lifeblood flows into Inanna's gore-encrusted bowl. "Santia, have you returned to your watch of the boy's grandparents?" "I am close, my queen. I have finished speaking with the man called Rodnovich." "And? Will this man prove to be a problem in the future?" I don't believe so. He seemed to possess no affinity for the boy and pledged not to interfere with our efforts. He said if Stuart were weak enough to be killed by a woman, he deserved to die." "Explain." Inanna is confused that the instructor of her brother's vessel would show no concern for the boy's fate. "He just sort of shrugged his shoulders and said he deserves to die if he loses. That man was a vile pig that has no respect for women. He said terrible things about you, my queen." "Did you not kill him for his lack of respect?" "My queen," she hesitates to relay the information. Fear of disappointing Inanna scares her tremendously. "In combat, I would have stood no chance of defeating that man. He is abnormally strong. There's something very strange about him." Inanna takes all of this in. Are you confident that he will honor his word not to interfere? His lack of concern for Stuart seemed real enough. Could you discover anything further about the man that would be useful? Very little. He has an abusive history towards women, and likely killed an ex-girlfriend. That is troubling. Inanna prevents herself from committing to detour merely to kill the potential threat Rodnovich may pose. As a powerful female, leading priestess and a queen, Inanna has had to deal with the biased attitudes of many males. Permitting such a man to live turns her stomach, but she is pressed for time. The longer she delays, the chances increase for her brother to successfully go into hiding or become arrested. It would prove very difficult to get him in a prison without endangering her own body. He is also a very accomplished martial artist. He would be one of the world's top ranked, but he was disqualified from as many competitions as he entered for nearly killing his opponents. Perhaps after I deal with my brother, I shall pay a visit to this man. Return to your place near the home of the vessel's grandparents, and I shall contact you again as soon as I land. Yes, my queen. Inanna turns, pushing the drained servant to the side where his head bounces off the nearest window, smearing blood all over the glass. Captain Garrison stares out the large windows before him, trying to study the topography as he descends below the clouds. Anywhere he can see that is flat enough to use as a runway is completely visible from major roads. Finally flying over several miles of swampland, he makes his decision. The air pressure changes drastically and the plane is rocked by turbulence. Inanna is thrown against a wall, hissing with irritation. Garrison drops the plane's nose down, descending quickly. What are you doing? Inanna screams. She may know nothing of mechanical flight, but the Sicarii is sure that this behavior is abnormal. Thinking of his children and grandchildren, his wife, Teresa, and of all the people that would be put at risk at the hands of Inanna, Captain Garrison plunges his plane into the swamp in his final flight. No one will ever know of his sacrifice, or his heroism. Any reports of the crash will be lacking the emotional aspect of the pilot's overcoming of the Sicarii Queen's mind control. Gases in the swamp ignite prior to impact, lit by the heat and energy of the falling plane. The front end of the plane all but disintegrates, raining fire, mud, and tiny glitter-like sparkles of metal. The rest of the plane drives into the ground with hundreds of miles per hour of momentum until the fuel tanks and engines are ruptured and explode in a brilliant fireball able to be seen for counties around. Smoke billows up from the wreckage in a mushroom cloud. Solid fragments of the plane are scarce, as most have been utterly destroyed. Inanna screams, standing up before staggering backwards and falling to her rear in the muddy waters. 5 inches of metallic shrapnel protrudes from the Sicarii Queen's right cheek. Her face is covered with contusions and lacerations. Due to only a last-second protective barrier of magic, Inanna clings to her life, while none of her servants remain. The bones of her lower right leg stick out of her torn jeans. Trying to curse, the Sicarii's screams come out merely as unintelligible howls of pain and rage. Ringing in her ears prevents Inanna from being able to think clearly. Several minutes pass before she is able to finally gather her thoughts. He crashed on purpose, Inanna hisses. She is surprised at the sound of her voice before realizing that she has bitten off the end of her tongue. Blood splashes to the muddy waters below. Police are the first to arrive, via hoverboats, and are astonished to see the crash's sole survivor. Helping Inanna from the water, the men wrap her in a blanket and check the extent of her numerous injuries. Inanna is silent, still suffering from shock. Her skin is ghostly white, all the color drained away. It's a miracle that you're still alive, a paramedic says as they are met on the way back out to the highway by a second hoverboat. Inanna is examined and told she has multiple broken ribs, a shattered jaw and collarbone, a fractured and protruding tibia, puncture wounds from the shrapnel, and hundreds of less severe Cuts, bruises, strains, and sprains. She is in essence a mess. "I need to heal," she whispers, barely conscious through her pain. "Yeah, that's going to be a very long process. You're going to be on a hospital bed for a few months, by my guess." "That will not do." Inanna slashes her hand across the paramedic's throat. The movement is a lightning-quick blur that the man is unable to register until his own fluids begin to stream forth. The police draw their weapons in surprise, but the shock of the appalling act is enough to give Inanna the advantage, even in her weakened state. All three men are pushed backwards over the side of their vehicle and into the water by a gust of conjured wind. A follow-up blast of Agnestra fire consumes the hoverboat in a fiery inferno. Anointing herself in the still flowing arterial blood of the paramedic, Inanna performs the Sendatu Heles healing spell, augmented through blood magic. The potency of the spell is enhanced, and the life within the paramedic's cells are transferred into Inanna, and repairing even the most serious of her injuries. Sitting with her feet hanging off the side of the boat, Inanna tries to formulate her next move. Her wounds are fully healed, but the loss of her servants and plane leaves her in an unfamiliar area all alone. At this point, she has no clue where she is or where she needs to go to find her brother and exact her revenge. One of the police officers reaches from the water, clawing at the side of the paramedic's boat for aid. Inanna pulls the man up, immediately putting him under the control of the Badari Control spell. "Drive this vehicle out of the swamp and get us to the town of Clear Springs." Officer Ty Hale nods, fully under the Sakari's control. The sound of frantic pounding resonating through his door awakens Rusty. Sitting up quickly, he pulls a t-shirt over his head and undoes the latch before cracking the old wooden door open to his bedroom. The door groans as it scrapes across the floor, having swelled over the years. "What time is it?" Rusty yawns, greeted by his elder brother Mitch. "You need to come downstairs," Mitch says, his voice sounding distressed. Rusty quietly observes his brother is still wearing the same clothing that he wore the previous day, and unlikely hasn't been to bed yet at all. He checks the alarm clock atop his brother's dresser and is shocked to see that it's already nearly 10 a.m. "We're late for school. Why didn't anyone wake me up?" Mitch says nothing, and the brothers descend the staircase, where Rusty discovers his home is a bustle of activity. Coming and going this way and that, family members push past each other, while loudly continuing numerous frantic conversations. At the dining room table, the boy's maternal grandmother, Margie Stewart, sits in tears, speaking to their mother, Sue. In the kitchen, aunts and uncles are glued to their phones, telling even more distant relatives of their predicament. "What the hell is going on? Did it become Thanksgiving early?" Rusty asks with another yawn. Saying nothing, Mitch pulls back the dining room curtain to reveal dozens of reporters, onlookers, and other paparazzi. The street is almost completely blocked by news vans from all of the single-digit television stations. I'm standing outside the home of the closest living relatives of the Inanna demonic trio, a triad of mother, son, and cousin killers, whose reign of terror has gripped the local communities, Victoria Campuzano says confidently. Her hair and wardrobe are perfect, planned hours before to accentuate her strong presence. Everyone at Circle City 1 News cheers together in victory with her spot-on delivery of every line that easily trumps the coverage of any other station. Last night, IMPD was called to the home of wanted teenage killer Jake Stewart, whose brutal attacks nearly 1 month ago silenced the nation. When officers arrived on scene, what they discovered was more carnage from the Stewart clan. The bodies of 2 of Jake Stewart's classmates were discovered, with one burned beyond all recognition and identified only later by a third teen who managed to survive the attack. With the murders of Melissa and Scott Tyndall by Jake Stewart's cousin Brooke, Jake's mother Ann is presumed by police to have been the perpetrator of these attacks, based on the location and the fact that her body has not yet been recovered anywhere, and she cannot be reached for comment. Likely, she has gone into hiding with her son. IMPD is now reopening the missing persons case of Ian Stewart, Jake's father, from earlier in the year and investigating whether or not Ann Stewart is now a person of interest. Brooke Tyndall was fatally shot, however, by IMPD detectives after she fired upon them in a follow-up investigation. In the shootout, veteran Lieutenant Andrew Hendricks was tragically killed. DNA had been tested from the crime scene of Melissa Tyndall's murder that tied her own mother to the gruesome event. For anyone with information to the whereabouts of either Ann or Jake Stewart, please contact our Crime Stoppers line or call IMPD directly at the following number. We will continue to be bringing you updates from Absinthe all day as new information arises. Rusty is shocked, staggering, and nearly falls to the floor. Brooke is the person that killed Melissa? That can't be true, he shouts. The teen can now understand why his family has circled the wagons and barricaded themselves together from the media circus outside. Not one, but 3 family members' names have been slandered, as they are painted to be murderers, when Rusty knows in his heart the true identity of the culprit. He didn't want to accept it before, but if the deaths in his family are continuing, then it must be Yamura. Yamura must have won his battle against Jake and managed to overtake his body again. He's returned to complete what he began, and that makes us all targets. The destruction of his vessel's family had been the Sakari's initial goal upon returning to flesh, but was thwarted by the combined efforts of Rusty himself, Jake, Danny Livingston, and Rusty's girlfriend, Amy Cross. Ann is missing now too, Mitch says, and they think she killed Brad and Vaughn. Wait, those guys are dead? Rusty is unable to find words. While he had not had affection for the 2 bullies, the idea that more people he knows are turning up dead is overwhelming. They say she is headed to meet up with Jake. Mitch's voice is cold, and Rusty cannot tell if he hides anger or sadness, or both. Fabian called me and said that they were out at Jake's house to vandalize it and scare Ann into moving away when a woman came out of the flames and killed Brad and Vaughn. He said she was a demon. A woman? Rusty wonders, having not expected that information. Has Yamura already discarded Jake's body and taken a new host? If that were true, then likely Jake was dead. He said she controlled the fire with magic and used it to burn up Vaughn. A magic user? Has Danny teamed up with Yamura? Or worse, is Yamura taking her as his new vessel? Possessing Jake was terrible, but the thought that the creature now has the ability to use magic is far more terrifying. He refuses to accept that Danny has become their enemy, after only so recently having seen her. She's part of a magical society now. That means that there are other people out there that can use magic. Yamura's probably taken one of their bodies, not hers. He tries to think of some way he can get in touch with her, in order to warn her of the dire situation. Inanna arrives in the city of Clear Springs, Florida, in the car of Officer Hale. Under mind control since finding the injured Sakari in the swampland, Hale has been able to use the resources at his disposal to locate the address of Gerald and Lydia Williams and officially pledge his support to the United Police and FBI effort to apprehend Jake Stewart. Once she is in town, Inanna contacts Santia after killing a random pedestrian. Santia is informed of her arrival in the city and the misfortune her queen has suffered since their last communication hours ago. Santia guides Inanna to the home that she is currently using to keep an eye on the Williams home. He is here? Inanna asks, sensing her brother. Yes, they don't venture outside much, but I have positively identified Jake Stewart within the home, Santia says. I have waited so long for this moment. Inanna is filled with sensations of anticipation and nervousness. The culmination of centuries of plotting has arrived. Then, shall we attack? Inanna slowly shakes her head. I wish to observe him first. I do not wish to be caught off guard by any more surprises. Her thoughts drift briefly to the failures of her confrontation with the police in Rockland, then again aboard her plane of mind-controlled servants. Officer Hale speaks up. Would you like for me to lure the boy outside? No, that will only serve to frighten him. Poor Jake has been fleeing the police for a month now. Seeing one will only trigger his response for flight. Instead, I want you to continue efforts to infiltrate the investigation and relay any information they receive to me first. Yes, my queen, he replies with a bow before returning to his car. Have you observed any unusual activity from the home? Inanna asks. Santia shakes her head slowly. No, I'm not sure if the grandparents even know about Yamura. I haven't heard any commotion, and all three people seem to still be alive. Interesting. It appears that the boy has my brother subdued. No matter. With enough motivation, I will be able to coax the bastard out of his slumber. Killing the boy would prove to be very unsatisfying. Inanna smiles, thinking of the revenge she has longed for. Only by killing Yamura shall my vengeance be sated. The police have routine patrols of the area, but somehow they missed Jake's arrival. I've not seen them for days, but they will eventually return. That would be troublesome. I pray that my newest servant will be able to slow their investigation down somewhat. Santia pauses, unsure if her question will elicit anger from her queen. Are they all really dead? Even Kara? Inanna nods, filling with regret and anger. I made miscalculations. I have learned that your kind can prove to be bothersome when underestimated. It was only through Kara's sacrifice that I am still alive. Were it not for her, the weapons of the police would have ended me. There will be many more police, and they will be heavily armed, should your battle with Yamura draw attention. I beg of you to end this quickly and suddenly before things can spiral out of hand. Inanna is surprised by her final acolyte's bluntness. Do you question my plan? I have laid out the steps I shall take for this revenge over the course of my many thousand years. Apologies, my queen, Santia backpedals. I only mean to wonder if that hatred and need for revenge has made you more brash. I would not want carelessness to take away from you all that you truly deserve. Inanna frowns, debating whether or not to strike Santia for her insolence. Yamura took so much away from me that a quick death would be unable to convey my suffering. He must learn what it is that he has done to me. Only then will death be allowed to claim my brother. Santia nods. As you say, my queen. I shall do whatever you ask. Turtle Rock, Arizona. Despite what you may have heard, this is not a live capture mission, Gator says as they near their drop-off point. The nerds may get pissy about it, but we cannot risk our lives in trying not to kill this bastard. We will bring whatever is left of the Yazata to them, but I refuse to endanger any more of us than we already are. The Yazata is going to be a more deadly opponent than any of us have ever faced, including myself. That said, we're going to cook this turkey and stop his ass from killing any more humans. I still don't understand why this Yazata is going to be so much stronger than a devil. We punked Asuka pretty thoroughly. Aren't they basically the same creature? Ruben asks. From what Mulder has told me, the Yazata that were captured after the wars had a lion's share of their power sealed when they were transformed into the devils as their punishment. The Grigori Yazata that remained free and evaded capture are still at full power. I'm not saying that devils are pussies by any means, but compared to a full-powered Yazata, well, meow meow. Approaching drop zone, the pilot shouts back to them. Put your game faces on, it's showtime, ladies, Gator announces. Target Big Bird is presumed alone in the warehouse, but we will not be taking any chances. Stay alert and watch for any signs of unexpected combatants. Gator's team touches down several miles away from the target warehouse. They make sure that they keep their distance and not draw attention. Unaware of exactly how precise the Yazata's senses are, they wish to be as cautious as possible. Each member of the team is equipped with a diamond-bladed sword, and the rounds they carry in their weapons are specially designed with fragments of diamond dust within. Mulder and the other researchers of Silver Fox have done their best to prepare the men for their battle against the legendary opponent. Through all of their searching, none of the agents have been able to find an accurate, historical record of a human defeating a Yazata warrior in combat. While this is disheartening, it does not change anything. Gator's team moves with all the skill and confidence of a group that has successfully hunted a dozen of the creatures. Believing their task to be impossible would only seal defeat for the team. The agents make sure that they do not let these fears creep into their minds. All that matters is that they have a mission to accomplish and they will not fail. Angelic being or not, the Yazata has killed many people and it must be stopped. How far is the warehouse? Gator asks, his eyes studying every shadow along the way. Another 3 blocks if we stick to the alleys and back streets, Means says, equipped with a digital map mounted to his wrist like an oversized watch. Their position is tracked by green markers, while the warehouse flashes with the red target. I'm gonna pluck one of the bastard's feathers and keep it as a souvenir, Reuben says, grinning with a large smile. You guys can divide whatever is left after the nerds collect their samples, Gator says. They'll need as much viable data as they can on the Yazata. Yeah, it's not like they're gonna have another opportunity like this. What other team is gonna have the honor of tearing apart a fucking angel? Easton adds. Don't take this lightly. If no one has ever killed one of these pricks before, it means that it won't be an easy task. Stay sharp and don't get overconfident. One slip-up and this fucker will run you through. The scarce intel we have on him all indicates that he is faster than us. He was able to wipe out an entire team of agents in seconds. If it were easy, it wouldn't be fun, Reuben says, still grinning. I enjoy a good challenge. Royce gives him a fist bump. Oorah! Gator shakes his head, smiling. He remembers the days when he was young and thought himself just as invincible as the members of his team. He prays that they are right, and they will dominate the Yazata and all walk away. Experience tells him that this will not be the case, and he swallows the doubts and fears. He must remain strong for his team and lead them with confidence and strength. He will do everything he can to ensure that the Yazata is the only one who will be dying in this confrontation. A scream escapes one of the buildings ahead, drawing the attention of the team. The isolation of the area demonstrates just how carefully chosen it was. With no businesses or residential areas nearby, the likelihood of someone hearing and reporting to the authorities the sounds of murders is low. While most of Benahil's victims have been Fravashi's Yazata guardians, the same cannot be said for Asuka, his demoniac entourage. Eyes open, Gator whispers, pointing to his own eyes with his index and middle fingers, before pointing them both towards the building. Could be more demoniacs, or it could be our primary target. It could be some sick human shit, Reuben mutters with disgust. His teammates remain silent, but they all know of the horrible things he's referring to. Devils and monsters do not have a monopoly on depravity. More murder and rape, molestation, and sadist acts are perpetuated by man every day. The team quietly maneuvers through the site, keeping to the small alleys between storage units and avoiding any open areas. Coming upon the source of the screams, they pause before splitting up on either side of the doorless entrance of the warehouse. Inside, a young woman in her early 20s hangs upside down, her ankles tied by rope. A group of men laugh as she takes swings at them, causing her body to rock in the motion of a pendulum. One of the men holds a knife, and he takes great pleasure in each of the shallow cuts he manages to inflict without her striking him. Gator notes that each of the other men are packing simple hardware in the waistbands of their pants. Orders? Means asks, his body shaking. He clutches his gun tightly, wanting nothing more than to let loose upon the men. Stand by, Gator whispers, holding up a hand. Make sure the Big Bird isn't present. Enough, Benahil says, materializing inside of the warehouse. The men back away in fear, allowing Gator and his team the chance to note their red eyes. Demoniacs, Gator confirms, keeping his hand up. We can't move in with that many hostiles. Benahil cups the woman's face in his hand. She trembles with fear, tears running down her cheeks. Be still, child. This will be over in only a moment. He looks to the demoniacs. Where is your leader? The possessed underlings cannot respond. Demoniacs are not created through the parasitism of a devil-named spirit inhabiting a human host. but rather from when a devil infuses his own power into others to create servants that gain some of their creator's strength and abilities. Unlike servants created through mind-controlling magic such as Vidari al-Controle, demoniacs are not bound to the will of their creator and have free reign. Most remain loyal to their origin devil through a sharing of carnage and destruction. He is late, Benahil growls. I have no need of a human without her Fervashis present. In the event that a guardian does not arrive to protect their pledges, Asuka has been capable of forcing that Fervashis to manifest through blood magic. Benahil does not know this ability and grows impatient. We can't just let her go, one of the demoniacs says. Benahil nods. I do not care what you do with her. I have no need of the vessels. That is Asuka's project. My end of this deal is merely to kill the Fervashis when they appear. Without a Fervashis, I am not needed here. The demoniac grins, holding his knife up to the woman's throat. Boss, Means growls, shaking. Gator thumbs the safety off his gun. Take them fast, so that we can move on to the primary target, before he can use any of them as cover. The team reacts like a single organism, flowing into the room with synchronicity and killing gracefully, like some macabre dance. Rifles rise and fire in unison. Heads are snapped back, bodies folding underneath them. In less than 3 seconds, all demoniacs are down, and the team is already sweeping their weapons towards Benahil. The first volley of bullets pass through the Yazata's image, as he evades them faster than their eyes can process. Now much closer, Benahil rushes them, but is forced to again evade, as Pierce fires an explosive grenade round from his M203 attachment on his rifle. Benahil flickers around the room, dodging at speeds that should be impossible. Bullets pass by the Yazata in slow motion as he moves ever closer to his attackers. When he is nearly upon them again, Gator draws his diamond-bladed sword and manages to push Benahil back with several furious slashes. Easton slips away from the others, running over to the young woman and working at pulling at the ropes from her ankles. That weapon cannot be a coincidence, Benahil says, studying his opponents. You are members of that same organization that attacked me before. Silver Fox. He does not ask, but rather makes this a statement. We know all about your alliance with the devils, Gator says. He grips his weapon tightly, remaining in a closed fighting stance and ready for any response. Why are you killing people? The lives of animals do not concern me. If Asuka wishes to butcher humans, I do not care. Care or not, you've killed your last person, Gator shouts, extending his sword. Benahil grins. You may have a Yazata-inspired weapon, but you will not be able to wield it with the same skill as I. He draws his own sword and vanishes using Shunkan Ito. Gator feels the air around him shift and turns just as Benahil's sword extends into his back. The movement causes the blade to pierce his side, missing Gator's spine. As soon as the Yazata attacks, the other members of the Silver Fox team fire upon him. Benahil teleports steps away in evasion, putting distance between himself and his attackers. Gator kneels, holding his side with one hand. Blood steadily drips to the ground between his fingers and collects in a dark pool. He grimaces, but keeps his eyes trained on the Yazata. You are incredibly fast for a human, Benahil compliments. That was meant to be a killing blow. Frag, Gator says, grabbing Pierce by his lapel. The veteran nods and withdraws a special explosive device from his pack. Shaped like an egg, the casing is filled with diamond dust shards to act as shrapnel. Pierce detonates the weapon, hurling it at the Yazata as he shouts for his teammates to find cover. Easton pulls out the last bits of rope from the young woman's ankles, and she falls into his arms. Both of them collapse on the floor and he manages to bring the corpse of one of the fallen demoniacs up as a shield, just as Pierce yells. The grenade is on a perfect trajectory for Benahil's chest, but he flashes to the left several steps to avoid it. Gator fires 2 carefully timed shots, forcing the Yaza to again change position and give the grenade time to land and detonate. The explosive rains glittering powder all around the room, larger shards of diamond embedding into the walls and the bodies of the demoniacs. Benahil growls, pulling an inch-long shard of diamond from his chest plate. The shrapnel was able to penetrate his armor and reach his flesh. He is both angered and impressed by the display of ingenuity the humans have shown. Unsure of them possessing even more powerful weapons, he elects to cut his losses and vanish, without so much as another word. Gator curses, knowing that they have lost their element of surprise against their target. Royce kneels, picking up a shard of diamond that pierced Benahil's armor. The tip is slick with a thick wetness that glows with a strange luminescence. "I think you made him bleed," Royce says, holding up the shard. Pierce looks at Gator as Reuben and Ellis help him to his feet. "At least we know that the nerds made good on their end." "Too bad we blew it on ours," Easton replies, turning over one of the demoniacs with his foot. "We saved a person's life, and none of us died," Gator says, wrapping gauze around his waist several times. "Let's not kick ourselves too hard. I'm sure this young woman is glad we interfered when we did." He gestures to her as Pierce begins to check out and treat her wounds. "We go back to base and rework our strategy, and we come back at this son of a bitch even harder." Benahil paces, still flustered by his encounter with the Silver Fox agents. He chastises himself for not killing them outright. In all of his millennia alive, no mortal has ever been a threat. Why now does he dwell on the human warrior with the sandy-colored hair and fierce green eyes? No human should be able to avoid Illuminatin, he thinks with frustration. Thousands of men have been sent to the great ferryman with that maneuver. His mind replays the moments over and over again as he desperately tries to make sense of it all. Teleport stepping behind Gator, the man is already in the process of turning around, even as Benahil's blade thrusts out. "I make mockery of my heritage, continuously fleeing from the Silver Fox organization. I do not fear any mortal. So why do I insist upon flight each time I am able to end the battle swiftly?" He stares at his hands, questioning his strength. "Have I hidden in the shadows so long that I cower from true confrontation? I lure my former brethren into traps and slay them through surprise and trickery. Has this dulled my skills? Do I no longer possess the instincts of a warrior that I once had?" He draws his sword and growls, slashing through the air. A deep trench is carved into the concrete floor and obliterates the wall opposite him. "I must regain my edge. It is disgraceful of a Yazata to flee from battle. I must prove to myself that I do not fear any mortal. Those Silver Fox soldiers shall return, and I will remain to face them without hesitation. They will expect a frightened being, unsure of his abilities, and in his place they shall find a proud Yazata warrior who will no longer flinch in combat." Benahil grins, filled with new confidence. "Those soldiers will come here, but they will not leave this time. Each of them will taste my blade and awaken on the shores of the great river beyond." Flies fill the window, and a horrid stench permeates the home. All 4 occupants of the home lie dead and bloated, faces contorted in pain. Dark stains cover the carpet, and bits of gore now teem with maggots. Inanna brushes back the lace curtain in the bedroom to watch as Jake re-enters the home of his grandparents after taking out several large, black trash bags for them. Movement behind Jake catches her attention. "What is this?" Inanna whispers, catching sight of 3 figures outside the home. The men are each in their early 20s and sport the maroon robes of provost magicians. The men are careful not to be seen, but obviously mean to keep watch of the Sakari-possessed teenager. My brother has attracted the interest of mages, Inanna smiles, looking forward to testing her new body against a more worthy challenge. Using a spell to alter the light bending around her servant Santia, Inanna walks the girl outside to draw the attention of the magicians. Inanna's spell makes it appear as though it is Jake walking into the backyard. Santia leads the men into the neighboring yard and into the waiting trap of her queen. Spell glyphs illuminate the ground beneath the men's feet, trapping them in place. My, it seems I've caught some interesting prey, Inanna taunts, walking towards them. She gently brushes her fingers across the nearest man's face, who is unable to move out of the way. I sense old magic within each of you. She scowls, suddenly pivoting with a lightning-fast strike. The nearest man's throat opens up into a geyser of blood as she slashes her claw-like nails across. The magician's companions are unable to even scream due to Inanna's spell. The dead man's body is prevented from dropping, instead hanging lifelessly in a pose of mock sentience. Grinning, Inanna snaps her fingers and grants the remaining two men the ability to speak. "You monster bitch!" Provost Jeffrey Thatcher screams, spit flying from his furious lips. Inanna shakes her head, rotating her hand to snap Thatcher's neck. Poor choice of words. She turns to the final remaining magician, Jean McKay. You now alone have the opportunity to say something worthwhile. McKay uses the freedom granted him for speech to quickly string together a rapid succession of feverish chants. Inanna's grin fades as the ground splits and her spell array is broken. She attempts to end McKay with a killing curse, but he drops to the grass and immediately kicks out against her shin. Inanna's leg buckles and she falls. The provost pivots with an orb of conjured flame. Santia intercepts, taking the blast to her own front. The woman screams as most of her torso is obliterated. McKay tries to follow up with a second attack, but Inanna has recovered. I sought to test my new vessel against a more worthy foe. Inanna stays, stopping McKay's movement, mid-swing with a paralyzing curse. Perhaps I was too sure of my own abilities that I chanced ruining all of my carefully laid plans. She leans in close, grabbing McKay's throat. You did well. Had I not a servant so willing to give her life for mine, you would not have claimed victory this day. Without another word, Inanna closes her hand and crushes the life from the final magician, spying on her brother's vessel. Inanna looks down at the still smoking remains of her faithful acolyte. Santia's eyes remain open, her jaw is frozen in a scream. Below her ribs, the entire right side of her body is burned away down to the knee. Your sacrifice will always be honored in my memory, Inanna whispers, closing Santia's eyes. She grows slightly worried that of her three closest attendants, none remain alive. My brother is more powerful and far more resourceful than these magicians that nearly ended me. I must be careful not to underestimate my enemies. Doing so cost me my previous host, and I do not intend for this one to share that fate. I have waited for far too long to lose my revenge to a mere slip-up such as this. Yamura will soon pay for all he has taken from me. I will not lose sight of what is within my reach.